Hey, it's Dave from Curtis Crafts, and today I'm showing you how to paint fake wood onto some EVA foam or really anything.
You left it outside, didn't you?
What I'm using to display this how-to is this Viking Shield that I made from EVA foam. It's inspired by the new Assassin's Creed game that's coming out. But before I get too far into painting it, I'm going to show you how I actually made the texture for the wood. All of this is done easier if you actually have some wood in front of you. This is a piece of pine that I picked up from the hardware store for about $3. And not only does it make a good straight edge for making the planks, but it's a really good reference if you're trying to copy this particular piece of wood.
Seems like an awful lot of work when you have wood right there.
But basically what I'm doing is using an X-Acto knife to carve the grain lines in the wood, and I'm just scoring it very lightly. And then I come back with a heat gun, which opens up all of the grooves. And now that the texture's in, you'd move on to the paint, which I'm going to use a few different shades of brown.
Ooh, you picked brown. How daring.
Yeah, I thought I'd mix it up since you never see brown wood. And on Curtis Crafts, we like to do wild things. But out of my 3 browns, I'm using the one that's in the middle in order to fill in the entirety of the shield. And I'll do a second coat of that. And then I'm going to move on to doing my darker bits of grain. And for that, I'm mixing in just a little bit of red with my darker brown and some of the light brown in order to try and match my reference. Then I go back and paint over some randomly selected grain lines in each of the boards. Once I'm done adding the darker brown, I go back and lightly dry brush on some of the lightest brown that I have. This adds in some of the lighter highlights that are in the grain. And that's all the detail that gets added to this color at this stage, so I start mixing up some blue.
Ooh, blue, my favorite color of wood.
This is actually supposed to be the painted part of the shield, which will be painted on opposite quadrants. And I'm using a darker blue in order to paint the base color for this, and it's supposed to be pretty thin. I'm also making sure not to go for full coverage, so it looks like the paint has been worn off in certain spots.
Looks like you missed some spots there.
That's what I just said. Are you even listening? Maybe next time you could teach the tutorial or something. Anyway, I finish up painting this blue quadrant, and then I move on to the opposite side of the shield and repeat. For this next part, I'm using some flat black paint and a large brush in order to do some artwork on the shield. I'm copying a picture of a raven that I'm looking at, and I'm trying to freehand it as best as I can. For the opposite quadrant of the shield, I'm just going to do some random line work because most of that paint is going to look worn off.
Ooh, I know this bird. It's the, Curvius lightinus.
I'm not using a lot of paint, and I'm trying to drag the brush sideways to make it look a little more rough. And it also allows me to thin out the brush stroke towards the end of each bit of the art. And then I start using the flat black to fill in the larger details that are going to look like iron.
Hey, whoa, you're getting pretty close with that. Ah!
Yeah, you should probably get out of the way. Having a larger workspace would be great, especially with something that's clogging up a lot of it and asking weird questions all the time, but I mix up some various lighter blues in order to make this look a little more worn where the painted areas are. I stay away from the extreme edges of each painted area and make it look as though it wears towards the center. And I also use this step in order to hide some of the artwork and make it look as though it has worn off as well. And what I'm doing now is making a grain painting brush. This is a technique that was shown to me by a sign painter, and he used it to make various reproductions of wood. You basically cut off most of the fibers of the brush and only use the ends in order to put the color onto the piece. Then you go through your lights, darks, and midtones in the color you're using and brush it gently along the surface. Once the wood grain is done, I move on to painting the dark red leather on the back of the shield. The PVC section that's still visible in the middle will be wrapped with fabric later. I then use small cut-up sponges and some gray and black paint in order to stipple on a pattern to look like forged iron. That's it for this project. I might come back and add some gunmetal or a different kind of color along the iron, but for now this is done. So if you like these kinds of things, be sure to like this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. And we spent a bit of time making medieval and Viking type things, so next time we're going back into future props, because none of these have lights.